I'm at Cambridge University and I'm here to interview a very well-respected economist called Dr. Ha-Joon Chang. He's the guy who wrote this book, plugging his book for him. Should go down well. 23 Things They Don't Tell You About Capitalism, massive bestseller. And the reason I'm doing that is because what I want this channel to be is a kind of, hub for alternative ways of looking at the world. And I want to challenge the status quo and, what we're told on a daily basis. And he's ideal for doing this because what we're going to do in this interview is kind of slay some myths, well, he will, and just show that the way the economy is run and the way we're told it should run, well, actually, it doesn't have to be like this. Surely austerity is necessary. If you have a situation where the government is spending more than it's getting back through taxation, then it has to balance the books. That's not ideological, that's just a fact.
The best way to defend a politically biased policy is to say that this is all matter of accounting and science. Objectively speaking, there was no need for Britain to run austerity program for 5 years, 6 years. When George Osborne first pushed for this, the excuse was that we don't want to become second Greece. Which is an absolutely ridiculous analogy.
Are you saying he was telling some sort of porky there?
Well, yes, if you want to put it that way, yes.
In terms of Britain's deficit and the economic situation Britain found itself back in 2010, what could a government have done differently?
When you have national debt and try to cut it, you are actually reducing demand in the economy, which then reduces the national output because firms cannot sell enough. And then your GDP might be shrinking, or at least shrinking faster than your debt is shrinking. This is why Greece, after 5 years of austerity, still has more public debt as a proportion of national output than before. Actually, the cutting deficit in an economic downturn can be a self-defeating strategy. The government actually can put a brake on that downward spiral by spending more than it gets in tax revenue. Balancing the books was not really what was behind this austerity policy. It was an attempt to undermine the welfare state, rewrite the social contract, and re-engineer the British economy in the image of American free market system.
Do you think it's fair to say we live in a society where it's socialism for the rich, capitalism for the poor? And if we are, dominated by corporate freeloaders, in what sense are we?
I'm afraid Britain's becoming more and more like that. And, for example, people criticize all these, freeloaders who sit on their backs and don't do anything, collect welfare payments. However, in terms of the free money they are getting, British corporations are actually getting far more than these welfare recipients.
In what way then? What do big companies get from the state?
We have a situation where ordinary taxpayers are subsidizing the corporations that pay wages that make it impossible for people to live a kind of sustainable life.
In-work benefits.
Exactly, in-work benefit. The benefit system was basically set up on the assumption that when people work, they'll be able to get decent amount of money. Now you have a situation where all these corporations that pay not even minimum wages or just above minimum wage, which is set at a very low level. And people, unless they are subsidized by the state, cannot make ends meet. So that they are getting subsidized massively for paying low wages. They also benefit a lot from state investment in infrastructure, in education, in research and development. But then they say, well, when it comes to paying taxes, it's our choice. It's an option. We will set up a paper company in the Cayman Islands and shift all the profits there. And we have come to take this for granted. This is outrageous. Thinking about these tax havens, they are the easiest things to deal with. Just imagine 10 most powerful countries declare that from tomorrow, any transaction that involves these designated tax havens will be considered illegal. They'll disappear. The worrying thing is that so many people have been almost brainwashed into accepting this, that the governments are the enemies of business, and business people are the the wealth creators, who shouldn't be constrained. If they don't want to pay taxes, that's their choice. This is the most unacceptable thing that we have come to take for granted, and we have to change this.
Taxation is theft. I bet you a lot of people on this video channel, that's what they're going to argue below the line. So what do you say to that? People
who say that taxation is theft have this view that they have created their wealth on their own. Now, this the view of taxation might be to an extent justifiable if we lived in the 16th century where everyone was a subsistence farmer, more or less. But today, in order to create wealth, you need a whole range of public support. You need the legal system, you need government investment in research and development and science, you need government investment in the infrastructure, government investment in education and worker training, and you are creating your wealth using all this. So what you have created is actually a joint production of your own entrepreneurial skill or labor or whatever you have put in there with contribution from the whole society. So saying that this is theft actually is saying that I'm going to steal the public bits, as if it is mine.
When people make the case for public ownership of utilities and services, there's an easy response. Go back to the 1970s, nationalisation is inefficient.
I'm not one of those people who insist on public ownership of these essential services. If you regulate them well, you can get all the benefits of public ownership without actually having public ownership. I mean, Japanese railways is a great example. Wherever you look at, I mean, water, railways, telecommunications, gas, I mean, the prices in this country are so high. I mean, this country's railway is unreliable, not punctual enough.
Very expensive.
Very expensive. Privatization of all these essential services where market competition really doesn't work, because when you have just one line of rail, you cannot have many companies competing for that. I mean, even fairly mainstream economists would accept that these are industries where public ownership or very strict regulation is necessary because the market competition mechanism doesn't work.
The welfare state, its critics argue that it's bloated, that we can't afford it anymore in its current form, and that it's basically subsidising fecklessness, laziness, the work shy.
There's one thing I would agree in that statement. I mean, the current welfare state needs reform because it was designed in the 1950s and 60s. Today we have a different situation. The people live for another 25, 30 years after they retire. They put the greater burden on the healthcare system. There are fewer younger people to pay for this. So yes, I mean, we might need some readjustment of the welfare system as a whole. But there's really no evidence that the welfare state actually encourages the idle lifestyle. Actually, people who say that, have they tried to live on the kind of money that the benefit claimants get? People have stopped seeing the welfare state as a collective social insurance scheme. This kind of collective insurance scheme actually gives stability in people's lives and make people more accepting of changes. I mean, for example, in countries like Sweden and Finland, the workers are much more willing, they may not prefer it, but are much more willing to accept the corporate restructuring because they know that it's not the end of the world. In countries where the welfare is weak, actually workers become very resistant to changes. I mean, the United States is the best example. I mean, of course, 90% of US workers are not unionized and they have very little political power. But insofar as you have unionized labor, these people will, of course, resist changes to death because, well, if you lose your job, you cannot even go to a hospital.
Inequality, what's the problem with it? I mean, as long as poorer people, end up better off, why does it matter if there's a gap between the poorer and richer sections of society?
I find it very curious because free market economists say, greed is a part of human nature, so you shouldn't constrain it. But when people talk about inequality, they say, "Oh, that's envy. That's not a good thing." Yeah. Well, I thought you are supporting letting human nature have its free reign. Yeah. So this is a very disingenuous argument. The problem is that we are social beings, and when you have these disparities in society, which, of course, in theory may be purely the result of individual productivity, but in fact, it's not. Yeah, we know that. Yeah, even if it were purely the result of productivity differential, we cannot run a society with a sense of solidarity, sense of belonging, sense of community. And when a society becomes very unequal, you actually begin to see a disintegration of the society, because the rich and the poor don't live in the same world anymore. I mean, they may live in the same legal entity called the United Kingdom, but it's as if one group live in the 22nd century, another group that are still working in some kind of Victorian workhouse. Yeah? Another is lack of social mobility.
Neoliberalism. This is a term you often hear bandied around to describe the kind of economic system that now dominates in Britain and much of the Western world. So succinctly, how do you define what is neoliberalism?
The 21st century version of liberalism, which is the economic doctrine that ruled Europe and North America in the 18th, 19th century. So for these people, the most important freedom, liberty, was liberty of property ownership and its use for its owner's benefit. Until the 19th century, the liberals were actually against democracy, because these people believed that, well, if you give votes to poor people, they will vote in a government that restricts our freedom to use property, which will destroy the free market economy. Neoliberalism is the 20th century reinvention of this old doctrine. They had to accept democracy, but they want a democracy that is neutered in the interest of property owners. So they want independent central bank so that the parliament cannot put pressure on the central bank to control monetary policy for the interest of the greater majority. They want independent commission for regulating utilities so that these people don't have to bow to the politicians.
It's often the case, I suppose, that the illusion of every era is that the way things are now are the way things will always be. But do you think the kind of economic system, prevailing order of things, do you think that one day will give way to something else?
100 years ago, this country and other countries put women in prison for asking for vote. 50, 60 years ago, all the founding fathers of the developing nations today were hunted down by the British and the French as terrorists. Only 25 years ago, Margaret Thatcher is supposed to have said that anyone who thinks that there'll be a black majority rule in South Africa lives in a cloud cuckoo land. But all of these things have happened. They don't give it to you. But if enough people fight for these things that once look impossible can happen. However, I live by the saying of Antonio Gramsci, the Italian Marxist, who said that you need pessimism of the intellect, but optimism of the will. So yes, we have to accept that the current situation might look rather grim, but we have to keep fighting for a better world. And I'm sure one day it will come. Maybe not in my lifetime, but I'm sure it will come.
You see, there is a different way of looking at it, and I think he's given a bit of a masterclass there. We've done loads of other interviews, which you can see on the screen, so click on some of those. Yeah, you might like them as well. And as ever, leave your comments below, subscribe. I'll see you next time.